Jesus is not trying to hide information or even to avoid a conviction from the accusations. Rather, he is calling out the injustice of the high priest. This is why he says what he says in verse 23 after he is struck. What has he said that was wrong? Everything he has taught, he has done so openly. You really could ask any number of people, even in Jerusalem during that time. In fact, the religious leaders themselves had heard much of what he said. They knew what he taught, and they have heard it. And if they weren't there, they had it reported to them by those who went to try to accuse Jesus. His words and message were laid bare both to the world and to his disciples. Jesus never backed down from the truth. He came to speak the truth. His works and his words in the presence of many witnesses speak for themselves. And here we have this stark contrast between Jesus and Annas. Annas, the true earthly high priest, and Jesus, the true king and Messiah of Israel. Jesus is the good shepherd. He lays down his life for his sheep. This shepherd of the people is in front of him. The shepherd that Annas is of the people in front of him is corrupt and a hater of the truth. He has no desire for true justice. His only desire is to uphold his power, to uphold what the leaders of the people had in their influence and their power for many generations. Jesus has come to see that the justice of God is satisfied for our sake by going to the cross for us. Annas is only trying to find a reason to get rid of this man and who has publicly torn down the facade that these religious leaders had. They're trying to get rid of the man who has exposed them for their self-righteousness and their appearance of righteousness. Jesus has come to bear witness to the truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father through him. He's said that. The religious leaders are willing to obscure the truth and maintain their own version in order to uphold their own way of life and their own authority. We see, not just in this gospel, but in the Synoptic Gospels, this constant battle between Jesus calling out the religious leaders for their hypocrisy and their self-righteousness. Since there is a need to continue to keep up with appearances and appease the legal process in order to bring Jesus before Pilate for his conviction, we see that Annas sends Jesus to Caiaphas, the current high priest. But we don't get this information in this gospel because it is unnecessary for the purpose John is trying to accomplish. Instead, John brings us over to the other side, to the split stage where Peter is still standing and warming himself. We go back to Peter. In verse 25, it says, Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, You also are not one of his disciples, are you? He denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man of the ear Peter had cut off, asked, Did I not see you in the garden with him? And Peter again denied it, and at once the rooster crowed. Peter is again asked to identify himself as a disciple of Jesus, to which he responds, I am not. Again, we have these overtones. There is clearly a contrast that is being drawn between the response of Jesus and the response of Peter when they are accused or asked to identify themselves. Peter says, I am not, which is uk eme. Jesus answers, ego eme, which is I am. There is this clear contrast between the two. When they are asked to identify themselves for who they are, Jesus says, I am. When Peter is asked to identify himself, he says, I am not. Jesus gives his response twice. Peter gives his response twice. But this contrast between the way Jesus responds in the face of trial and the way Peter responds, it puts into brilliant light the difference between the power of Jesus and the fleshly weakness of Peter. Jesus stands resolute in the face of incomprehensible wrath, the wrath of God, and Peter crumbles under the fear of man and their response to him. Peter thought he would go down fighting. His previous boast was of this idea that he would fight to the death. What he was not willing to do was lay down his life. Jesus laid down his life